we're making sure you don't have anything on you, alright?
I don't. I've never been in trouble before.
That's good. Then this will be quick. Keep breathing for me.
Can I call my mom after this?
Please, we'll talk about that in a minute. Almost done.
What you're about to hear is a reconstructed account of a police interaction that later raised serious legal questions. It was late morning on May 23, 2023, just after 11:30 in Cheyenne, Wyoming. The sky was clear, the road quiet, and nothing about the day suggested it would end up documented in court filings, internal reviews, and public discussion. For 25-year-old Morgan, it was supposed to be an ordinary drive home after work. She worked as an equine therapy assistant, helping patients during guided sessions with horses at a ranch outside the city. When her shift ended, she got into her car, still wearing her protective riding vest, thick and padded by design. The vest was standard equipment, meant to reduce injury in case a horse shifted, bucked, or kicked unexpectedly. It was practical, familiar, and something she wore almost every workday. Morgan had never been stopped by police before. No criminal record. No history of trouble. No reason to believe she would attract attention. As she drove back toward town, her thoughts were on mundane things. What she would eat when she got home. Whether she had enough time to stop at the store. How tired she felt after the morning session. She didn't notice the patrol car at first. When the emergency lights activated behind her, she signaled and pulled over immediately. Her first reaction wasn't fear, but confusion. She replayed the last few moments in her head, trying to figure out what she might have done wrong. Speeding, a missed sign, a broken taillight? Nothing obvious came to mind. The officer approached and asked for her license, registration, and insurance. Morgan complied without hesitation, explaining that she was coming from work at a ranch just outside Cheyenne. Her tone was calm, cooperative. Everything about the interaction, at least initially, appeared routine. Then the officer's attention shifted. He looked at the vest. According to later reports, he stated that the protective riding vest appeared bulky and could potentially conceal something dangerous. Morgan looked down at herself, visibly confused, and explained that it was safety equipment used when working with horses. She told him where she worked. She assumed the explanation would resolve the concern. It didn't. She was asked to step out of the vehicle. Morgan complied again, moving slowly, keeping her hands visible. At that moment, confusion turned into anxiety. What had started as a traffic stop was no longer clearly about driving. She asked what the issue was. The officer reiterated that the vest concerned him, and that he needed to ensure she didn't have anything on her. He told her to keep breathing, that it would be quick. Those words were meant to reassure, but they didn't. Witnesses later described Morgan as visibly distressed. Her hands shook, her voice trembled. She repeated the same sentence more than once, trying to make herself understood. I don't have anything. I've never been in trouble before. The situation continued to escalate, not because of anything she did, but because the interaction had already moved past explanation and into control. A physical search began in broad daylight, on the side of the road. Cars passed by. Drivers slowed down. A ranch worker nearby noticed what was happening and stopped to watch. From a distance, it was clear something was wrong. Morgan was crying. She appeared overwhelmed, struggling to stay calm while being searched in public. At one point, her voice broke. She asked a simple question. Can I call my mom after this? The question wasn't defiant. It wasn't argumentative. It was the voice of someone scared, reaching for something familiar, something grounding, in a moment where she no longer felt in control of what was happening to her. The officer told her they would talk about that in a minute. The search continued. Several minutes passed. Despite the concern that had justified the escalation, nothing was found. No weapon, no contraband, no illegal item of any kind. The vest was exactly what Morgan had said it was from the beginning. Protective gear used at work. The officer stepped back. The interaction ended. Morgan was allowed to leave. She got back into her car and drove away, still shaking, still trying to process what had just happened. The roadside encounter was over, but the impact of it had only begun. The ranch worker who had been watching had recorded part of the interaction. The video showed a young woman crying, asking to call her mother, repeatedly insisting she had nothing on her. It showed a search that produced nothing. When the footage was shared online, it spread quickly. not because of violence, but because of vulnerability. As the video circulated, reactions came quickly. Viewers didn't see a crime being prevented. They didn't see a dangerous situation diffused. What they saw was a young woman standing on the side of the road crying, asking to call her mother, after being searched despite repeatedly saying she had nothing on her. The comments reflected confusion as much as anger. People asked the same question over and over again. Why did this have to go that far? For Morgan, the days after the incident were heavy. She returned to work, but the normal rhythm felt disrupted. Simple things became harder. Driving past police vehicles caused her chest to tighten. She replayed the stop in her mind, wondering if there was something she could have said differently, something she could have done to make it end sooner. The answer, she would later realize, was probably no. According to later court filings, Morgan experienced ongoing emotional distress following the stop. She described anxiety, trouble sleeping, and a persistent fear that something similar could happen again. What unsettled her most was not just the search itself, but how quickly control had been taken from her without explanation that made sense. The video continued to spread. It reached people who worked in law, former officers, civil rights attorneys, legal analysts. Many of them focused not on intent, but on justification. Under constitutional standards, physical searches require more than discomfort or speculation. They require clear, articulable facts that can be explained and defended later. In this case, the justification remained thin. The protective riding vest had been identified as the reason for concern. But once it was visually confirmed to be exactly what Morgan said it was, the continuation of the search became harder to explain. The footage showed no sudden movements, no threatening behavior, no attempt to flee or resist. It showed cooperation paired with visible fear. That distinction mattered. Morgan eventually consulted an attorney. Together, they reviewed the footage, witness accounts, and the officer's statements. The absence of any discovered item became central to the discussion. A search that yields nothing is not automatically unlawful, but it places significant weight on the reasoning that led to it in the first place. A civil lawsuit was filed. According to the complaint, Morgan alleged that the search violated her constitutional rights and caused significant emotional trauma. The filing outlined the sequence of events in detail, emphasizing what was observed, what was said, and what was ultimately not found. Witness video was referenced. The setting was described. The emotional impact was documented. The case moved quietly at first, as most civil rights cases do. There were no press conferences, no dramatic announcements, just requests for records, internal communications, and documentation related to the stop. An internal review followed. While departments rarely release full details of such investigations, officials later confirmed that disciplinary action was taken after the review concluded. That confirmation signaled that issues had been identified, even if the department did not publicly debate every detail. As the legal process continued, the video remained a factor. Not because it was edited or sensationalized, but because it was straightforward. It showed what it showed. A search. A distressed woman. No discovery of anything dangerous. Settlement discussions eventually began. These negotiations are rarely about guilt. They are about risk, about how a jury might interpret the footage, about how much weight witnesses would carry, about whether the explanation offered would be convincing under oath. In Morgan's case, those calculations led to a decision. The city agreed to a financial settlement. The amount approved was $824,000, finalized through county court. The agreement resolved the lawsuit without a trial and without an admission of wrongdoing. On paper, the case was closed. In reality, its impact extended beyond the documents. For Morgan, the settlement represented acknowledgement that what she experienced was not insignificant, that it was not something she simply imagined or exaggerated. It validated that the fear she felt on the side of the road had legal weight. But it did not erase the experience. She did not become an activist. She did not seek public attention. She wanted to move on. Yet the video continued to circulate, drawing new reactions each time it resurfaced. For people encountering it for the first time, the footage still felt immediate, still uncomfortable to watch. Because the question it raised was simple. When does a routine stop being routine? That question lingered long after the paperwork was signed and the case was officially closed. Because what made Morgan's experience unsettling to so many people was not just that it happened, but how easily it happened. There was no dramatic chase, no shouted threats, no criminal behavior to point to afterward. Just a sequence of decisions that moved forward without stopping to ask whether they still made sense. Legal experts who later discussed the case often returned to the same issue: escalation without reassessment. Once the officer identified the vest as a concern, the interaction shifted into a different mode. From that point on, the goal was no longer to clarify, but to confirm suspicion, and confirmation was pursued even when the facts no longer supported it. This is where many civil rights cases are decided. Not in moments of chaos, but in moments where restraint should have replaced momentum. Where authority should have paused instead of pressed forward. The Constitution does not prohibit caution, but it does require justification. It does not forbid searches, but it demands that they be reasonable. Reasonableness is not determined by fear alone. In Morgan's case, the question was never whether an officer could be cautious. It was whether that caution had crossed into intrusion without sufficient cause. The footage showed compliance. The witnesses confirmed cooperation. And the outcome of the search confirmed what Morgan had said from the beginning. There was nothing there. For many viewers, the most striking part of the video remained the same brief exchange. Not the search itself, but the moment where Morgan asked to call her mother. That question cut through legal arguments and policy language. It exposed the human reality beneath the procedure. A young woman, overwhelmed and scared, reaching instinctively for safety. That instinct resonated because it was universal. Psychologists often explain that in moments of stress, people seek grounding. They look for familiar voices, familiar relationships, reminders that they are not alone. Denying that connection, even temporarily, can deepen the sense of helplessness. Being told, "We'll talk about that in a minute," keeps a person suspended in uncertainty. That suspension is what many people recognized in the footage. After the settlement, officials framed the outcome as resolution. Procedures were reviewed, training was referenced, statements were carefully worded. From an institutional perspective, the matter was handled. From a public perspective, it became a reference point. Morgan's story was shared not because it was unique, but because it felt disturbingly ordinary. It did not rely on extreme behavior or rare circumstances. It relied on a judgment call made during an everyday interaction. That is what made it unsettling. The realization that nothing extraordinary was required for things to go wrong. As discussions around policing continue, cases like this often surface as quiet warnings, not accusations, but reminders. That authority carries weight. That discretion must be paired with restraint. That people experiencing fear are not obstacles to procedure, but individuals deserving of clarity and dignity. The legal system addressed Morgan's case through compensation and closure. But the broader question it raised remains unresolved for many who watch the video. How much explanation is enough before action is taken? How much intrusion is justified by uncertainty alone? And how often do ordinary people find themselves navigating those questions without knowing the rules well enough to protect themselves? Morgan returned to her life, to her work, to her routines. But the belief that doing everything right guarantees safety no longer felt absolute. That belief, once fractured, is difficult to fully restore. The video still circulates, quietly, periodically. Each time, it reaches someone new. Someone who watches and feels that tightening in their chest. Someone who imagines themselves standing there, trying to stay calm, trying to understand what is happening, trying to breathe. Because the power of this story does not come from outrage alone. It comes from recognition. The recognition that vulnerability does not require wrongdoing. That compliance does not always prevent escalation, and that sometimes, the most revealing moments are not the ones filled with conflict, but the ones filled with fear. A routine drive home, a vest worn for work, a search that found nothing, and one question, asked quietly, that continues to echo far beyond the side of that road. "Can I call my mom after this?"